Hello, hello. Here we are checking in. It's been a while since I've done this, since I've poked my little head live. I gotta say, I feel a little bit nervous. The ego grasping is like catching on. So, gonna keep it kind of brief today. I'm currently taking astrology classes every day from my friend. His account is Spain in Cassiopeia. Highly recommend him. He's wonderful. And we discussed today Moon is in Pisces, which makes the mind a little sleepy and a little kind of out there. So that's how I feel. Hopefully, I'll do this well for you guys. Thanks for joining. So without further ado, let's jump onto some of the questions that were sent to me. First of all, I just want to make an intention that whatever comes out of my mind and my mouth be most beneficial to all in the highest way. Okay, so let's start with the question that has to do with, it's kind of like down to earth question. How do you use social media constructively, and are there really any benefits of being online? Which is a very good question and very relevant to this day and age. By the way, I have two platforms going on, so I'll be looking at different cameras at different times. So there are two ways to approach this question from the perspective of a creator, which is my perspective, right? But also from the perspective of a user. So like all things, everything is dependent on how we use it. So, if you have a hammer, it's a tool, right? So you could use it to build a house or to break somebody's bones. So whether it's good or bad depends on how you use it. It's the same thing, and this is actually Tibetan Buddhist philosophy talks about this, that like reality of all things are kind of relative to the person who perceives it, to the person who does the action, right? So from this perspective, certainly social media nowadays has become a cesspool of ego and shadow activity. It's the quickest way for us to grab attention, to find validation. It's also a place where people tend to put their best foot forward. And it's something that has significantly contributed to building a facade. It's like we put up what is our idealized sense of self, what we want other people to see. But then, of course, when you scratch the surface, there's a lot more going on, right? So it's a kind of reality that creates and encourages facade and a kind of false representation. And it also increases ego grasping because the ego, like I mentioned before, is a bottomless pit of sort of desire for attention, for approval, for validation, right? So from that perspective, social media really activates those elements of mind that are based in ego grasping, which is ego grasping is directly opposite of what we're trying to build and create through spiritual practice. So ego grasping is the very thing that keeps us trapped, that keeps us stuck and unhappy. Because when ego, doesn't get what it wants, then we have sort of, a meltdown, right? So with social media, also another issue with that is obviously it sucks our time, and it steals our attention, which is our most valuable commodity, time and attention, right? So it kind of has a way of hypnotizing us. And so from that perspective, it depends on how you use social media. Are you using it to grow your potential, to get information, or are you just using it to pass time and to avoid something? And this is, my last post was on binge behaviors. And one of the known ways to avoid ourselves and our life, in addition to like self-medicating through drugs and alcohol, is, to fixate on things that are very addictive in nature. And social media is very much one of those things. So from this perspective, you want to curb your use of social media in the same way you would curb your fixations and your overindulgence in substances and things of that nature, right? Okay. Are there any benefits of being online? Again, that has to do with what's your intention, number one, and then what you're actually exposing yourself to. So I'm just going to stop there. Another thing I want to mention is that social media, we tend to really get stuck in social media at night when we're supposed to go to bed. So what I do is I power down my phone by 8 p.m. And that way, as soon as 8 o'clock strikes, I turn on airplane mode, turn off all screens, and then you have 2 hours to get ready for bed. And the interesting thing is, all spiritual traditions talk about, the power of the early hour. The most powerful time to do prayer and meditation is before sunrise. So obviously, if you're getting stuck on social media and staring into the screen, it will rob you of your sleep. So you're not going to be able, to seize the day. In Serbia, we have a saying, "Ko rano rani dve sreće grabi," which means who wakes up early, who rises early, is extra fortunate, gets extra blessings. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. Moving on to the next question that has to do with spirits and compassion towards them. This question comes from somebody who's a Buddhist practitioner. So I'm going to kind of approach this question from the Buddhist worldview, from the Buddhist point of view, and then also from the point of view of a Christian mystic. And, when we talk about spirits, we talk about order of beings that have consciousness. And from this perspective, all things that have consciousness are sort of sentient. Sentient, the word sentient in Tibetan Buddhist terms is semchen, and it means mind possessor. So that means that any sort of action that you direct to such beings create karma. And karma, you could also think of it creates mental imprints, right? And will therefore impact how you perceive reality and how reality unfolds for you in the future. So spirits, so there are 6, in a desire realm, there are 6 forms of beings. There are humans, animals, hell beings, hungry ghosts, demigods, and gods. And in this category fall spirits that we, whether we're talking about nagas, which is the kind of elemental spirits of water in the Buddhist tradition, or we're talking about Goetian demons, and so forth, they would fall under the category of beings who are stuck in samsara, which is the cyclic existence, wherein we're kind of incarnating into a sort of mode of existence. So we're all in samsara, right? So when we die, we sort of reincarnate, and we keep doing this. Now, from this perspective, spirits and hungry ghosts and animals and all different types of beings can eventually reincarnate as human beings. And we all have a potential to reach liberation, right? So now, in terms of, so from the Buddhist point of view, there are 2 wings that we need to reach enlightenment. The wing of compassion, which is basically another word for love, wishing others to be happy, having love for sentient beings. And the other one is wisdom. So, and wisdom specifically refers to penetrating reality, because the reality appears to us through a certain lens, and we never really behold reality as it is. We're always kind of seeing aspects of our own mind being mirrored back at us. This is the concept of projection. Jung talks about it in psychology, Buddhists talk about it. Actually, a lot of spiritual traditions have this concept. So wisdom has to do with penetrating that veil, meaning seeing reality as it is versus how it appears to us. And how it appears to us is dependent on our sort of self-referential points, self-referential point of view. Okay, so let's just, not to open a can of worms here, let's fixate on compassion. Why is it important for compassion, to be sort of practiced in our everyday life? First of all, compassion, you're not engaging in the kind of attitude of compassion necessarily for the benefit of others. I mean, you are, but the first benefit is your own. Compassion protects your own mind from afflictions. So, like, if you are somebody, who cultivates compassion, in a kind of highest sense, the end result of that will be that you're seeing the world through that lens. And therefore, if somebody's doing something wrong or something afflictive or problematic, person who doesn't train in compassion will have an afflictive reaction. There'll be hatred, aversion, stress. And we all know that these states of mind directly undermine our own well-being. Now, a person who has compassion has capacity to step outside of their own ego grasping, outside of their self-referential point of view, and they have the wisdom to see that, whoever is doing, let's say, problematic behavior is doing it because, either they're confused. Let's take an example, like a really kind of extreme example of a serial killer. So, like, somebody, and we all know that type of person is created by, abuse in early childhood, right? So if you understand the reality of this person and you understand that they're basically just responding to their own negative karmic conditions, and also, thinking that, like, if I grew up in a very abusive household, I would probably also have a similar kind of mind and engage in similar kind of harmful behavior, then you can kind of have a greater understanding that, like, things are caused. The way people act and treat others is, by and large, not always, but by and large, dependent upon their childhood. So if they had abusive parents, so of course, it follows suit that they're going to engage and perpetuate, generational trauma and so forth. So from that perspective, you can kind of have compassion for the person, particularly because from the Buddhist point of view, everything that we say, do, think, any sort of actions that we create will necessarily ripen in the future as a similar sort of effect. So if somebody is doing a great deal of harm, it will ripen for them in the future as a great suffering, right? So from that perspective, you can kind of generate compassion. Now, generating compassion for somebody doesn't mean you agree with what they're doing. It just means that you have a certain, that you have a capacity for love, realizing that every human being, we're all equal in a sense that we all want happiness and we all wish to avoid suffering, right? So from that perspective, you can generate, compassion for this person, understanding that, like, they create a great deal of harm, and in the future they will necessarily suffer because of that. So compassion, so in this sense, when you have compassion, you can't have both hatred and compassion in your heart at the same time. You cannot be both peaceful and afflicted at the same time. So if your modus operandi is compassion, if you respond to world in this kind of from this kind of point of view, that necessarily indicates that you're going to have a kind of more wholesome experience of reality. You're gonna be able to reside in happiness and peace, right? And this is why across the board, all spiritual masters always advocate love and compassion, because when you realize those realities, you become basically a master of the universe. I love using that term, master of the universe, because what that means is that you're utterly and fully in control of your own reality, which means that no matter what happens around you, nobody can sort of move you or affect your state of mind. You're always you're in control. You're in the state of peace and happiness no matter what happens around you. And the key to getting to that place is developing compassion. Okay, so that's a Buddhist perspective, but like I said, all spiritual masters, no matter what tradition they come from, advocate cultivation of love and compassion. So we could say that it's a kind of a universal value. And the only thing is that it's not being specified. When we think of compassion, we think like, oh, we're doing something for somebody else. But it's like, no, primarily we're cultivating compassion so that we can master our own reality, our own selves. Now, applying compassion to spirits, which is and I know this person, I know the context from which they're asking this question is this person has been sort of believes that they have been afflicted by spirits. So he's trying to kind of gain control of his situation. And this can also apply, to people who harm us in our everyday life. Like, how can we keep compassion for somebody like that? And that's, I have to say, that's a kind of higher level. Like, you have to start somewhere. You're not going to be able to generate compassion for somebody who harms you directly. If you can't even generate compassion for somebody out there whose actions don't impact you, firsthand. So you got to start somewhere. You start by generating compassion for your loved ones, and then you start to generate compassion for people out there who don't affect you. And then eventually you get to a point where you are able to hold the view of compassion even for people who are kind of harming you. So spirits and compassion towards them specifically, understanding that anybody who generates harm and who creates problem is in the state of suffering themselves. And one of my teachers, Lama Zopa, said, if you can't help sentient beings, at least don't harm them. And harming them and harming yourself would be engaging in negativity further and perpetuating negativity and perpetuating aversion. So, generating compassion, let's say for spirits, would have to do with self-preservation first and foremost, and second of all, with just changing the karma that you have with that being. So even this concept of like why somebody harms us, why like when something happens, like let's say let's take a current example of like certain person became a president, and his policies will benefit one group of people and will undermine another group of people. So like how we're affected by any situation has directly everything to do with our karma that we have with that person, right? This is again Buddhist perspective. So karma means, in Buddhism, there is this notion that, reincarnation is a thing. So, we're reborn, we go through life, we die, and then we're reborn. And we keep doing this. We're kind of stuck in this wheel of life and birth and rebirth until we exit the wheel, and we become enlightened, right? At which point you have full control over where you manifest and how, and you can choose whether you want to be reborn or not, right? Or you could dwell in nirvana, or you can manifest yourself, in reality to help beings, right? So, sorry, so I lost train of thought. So, karma, right? So basically, if you're on the receiving end of harm from another sentient being, the wisest thing you can do is to heal that karma. And that means that, like, if you cannot help the person, at least don't harm them. And if you have somebody in your life who's directly harming you and you don't have wisdom or power to remedy the situation, the best thing to do is to just remove yourself, right? And if you heal the karma with that being in future modes of existence, you're not going to have a problem with that being. And if somebody, for example, robs you, the reason why they're robbing you from the Buddhist perspective is because, you kind of did something similar to them in the past. So for me personally, it's kind of a matter of attitude. It's like, I've been robbed in the past, and I've, been on a receiving end of various things. And the highest way that you can deal with a situation like that is to kind of, if you can't retrieve your money, and if you can't, then the best way is to generate a kind of attitude that, like, I give them that which they took, may they be happy, and I paid my debts to them, so now I'm done. So, like, you're turning a situation that's seemingly problematic, that's obviously problematic, right? But you're turning it into a stepping stone to healing, right? So that's a very powerful way to transform your reality. That's what alchemy is all about. Okay, let's see. I'm just looking at my notes so that I can, like, consider all the little thoughts. Okay, I think I touched on all the points. Now, there are a couple of things that people asked in the past that I promised I was going to expand on. Jealousy. Somebody asked about jealousy. They're struggling with jealousy. So first of all, we're all human beings, and we're all driven, by ego, and we all have challenges like jealousy, greed, selfishness. We're all afflicted by these things, right? These are human qualities, or rather, this is the aspect of the kind of human animal. And the path of spirituality is going, moving away from the human animal, which, the animal aspect is like, I'm always looking out for number one. Animal is totally driven by instinct. And, what is the instinct? Instinct is like running towards pleasure impulse and running away from pain. And that always has to do with, what do I want? What do I need? My own self-preservation, which is, of course, important. However, in this day and age, most of us are not living in reality where, we have to, like, kind of fight for food, or what I mean. So we're not living, back in the day when we were cave dwelling humans. It was a very kind of survival oriented reality. Now things are a little bit different, but we're still driven by that prehistoric software, which is like, kill or be killed, right? So spirituality is about moving from this human animal reality, like from this kind of looking out for number one, moving away from that and moving more towards our human qualities, which have to do with rationalism, with morality, like things that animals cannot practice because they don't have rational mind. So morality is where we make a conscious choice, to take a kind of higher road. To consider others, to be mindful of the benefit of other beings. So, you're not going to harm somebody just so that you can benefit, because in reality, harming others to create benefit for ourselves in the moment, it might benefit us in the moment, but in the long run, it totally undermines our well-being, because it creates negative karmic imprints, which again will necessarily ripen as suffering in the future. And it also will cause you, like, if you're a kind of person that's very angry, like if you reinforce certain behaviors, or if you're somebody who steals from other people, you're going to be more paranoid. Your reality is going to become such that you're paranoid that others will steal from you. You're going to be more likely to get easily angry at every little trigger. So like whatever you cultivate in your mind, in your life, is what's going to create a kind of what is that, boomerang effect. It's like what you send out will come back to you in the form of how you perceive reality, and what kind of states of mind will that generate. So from that perspective, right, things like jealousy and greed and so forth, we really want to actively work on those things. And for a lot of people, I gotta say, if you're cognizant of your own jealousy, if you're fully aware, like I am jealous, of this person, I want this person to suffer, or I want to undermine them because I'm jealous, that itself is a kind of that means you have capacity to see yourself. A lot of people don't have that capacity. For a lot of people, those kinds of things are in the shadow realms. And what we put in the shadow realms is like outside of our conscious awareness. So like the ego doesn't want to acknowledge, anything about ourselves that makes us feel shame or pain. If it's something we don't like about ourselves, we'll suppress it into unconscious, right? So if you can see things about yourself that are problematic, you're already doing better than a lot of people, right? You're already kind of living in reality. You're in touch with yourself. But the next step is like, you don't want to empower that jealousy. You don't want to kind of give into it. You don't want to feed into its narrative. What you want to do is you want to challenge it, and you want to understand that jealousy is a kind of infantile thing, because when we were children, when we were little kids, we were more of a kind of human animal person, meaning like when we don't get what we want, we throw a temper tantrum. Like, so it's a very immature impulse. When somebody takes our toy, we go and hit him, right? Like that's like that's giving into jealousy, right? So what can you do instead? It's understanding that jealousy arises from the part of your mind that's like your inner child, the part of you that's immature, that's challenged. And, so you don't want to kind of follow jealousy and, undermine somebody or harm somebody because you're jealous of them. That's one thing you don't want to do. Another thing you don't want to do is you don't want to generate guilt and shame, because those two things, guilt and shame, are really impotent. The only thing they do is they make you feel bad. And when you're in that place, you're kind of powerless. You're just, right? So what you want to do instead is think about, like, where is this coming from? What is my jealousy teaching you? What is my jealousy teaching me? And how can I use my jealousy as a stepping stone to growth? And that's alchemy, right? You use prima materia, or like, you use the garbage in your life, the shit in your life, and you use it as a kind of opportunity for growth. So turning lead into gold. There is this concept of a lotus, which is a symbol for spiritual potential. Lotus grows out of mud and swampy waters. So that means that, like, in the mud and the swampy waters of our being is our potential for enlightenment. It's not in our positive aspects. I mean, it is, but that's not enough. We need to go into the garbage of our being, and we need to transmute that, and find that seed for that lotus to blossom. So, with jealousy often has to do with, if we feel inadequate, or if we feel insecure and somebody shows up and we sort of wish to be like them, and then jealousy can arise, like, oh, they have something that I don't have. So like understanding that, like, okay, the real enemy here is our low self-esteem. The real enemy is our attachment to having what we don't, what we want but can't have, right? So these are the real enemies. So you want to identify the real enemy, and you want to use them as your teacher. So let's see. I'm just trying to see if I should like have like a little example. So for me, let's talk about, my personal example. It's the best way. For me, like, I'm somebody who cultivates actively spiritual qualities, right? But even for me, sometimes something will come up and I'm like, wow, I think I have a little kind of envy for somebody. So what you immediately want to do is you want to replace that by rejoicing for the person who has what you want. So in your mind, you're like, how wonderful that this person has mastered this quality or has created causes and conditions for this good thing to manifest in their life. So you want to kind of rejoice for them. When you rejoice for somebody, that's a kind of direct antidote to jealousy. So that will automatically, again, that concept of like, you can't be both loving and hateful. You can't be both afflicted and relaxed at the same time. In the same way, jealousy is a type of affliction. It generates stress response. So when you rejoice for somebody, you're automatically undermining the jealousy and expanding the positive states of mind. And also, rejoicing for somebody else's blessings karmically creates causes for you to receive those same blessings in the future. One really good example with money, I see, a lot of this online where like there are a lot of people, especially people in spiritual communities, which is mind boggling to me, who hate people simply because they're wealthy. And I think all of us have this to some extent. There is a general aversion for people who are billionaires and millionaires, just kind of like by default. And I understand that there are a lot of people who are billionaires who are maybe not using their wealth wisely, who are engaging in harmful behavior, but that's besides the point. It's like our automatic response to somebody having some kind of great abundance is aversion. So when you engage in aversion for people who are abundant, it's a very toxic trait, because the impact of that is that you're saying that like people who have abundance are inherently not likable. They're inherently problematic. And when you have that, that kind of belief becomes like a seed in your unconscious that sprouts in such a way that your unconscious will make sure that you yourself don't become abundant. Because if you do, that will mean that you're unlikable and you're inherently like not spiritual. Not do you understand what I'm trying to say? I don't know if you guys can send me any questions if you want me to clarify things, but that's basically it's others automatically create the grounds for whether for what you will receive in your life. It's like you're planting seeds. If you're planting seeds of anger and aversion and jealousy, the effects of those seeds will ripen in your life as effects. So I think I'm gonna stop here. It's 30 minutes in. Thank you guys for watching. It's been kind of a little bit all over the place. It's been a while. I feel like I got a little bit out of practice with the lives. Like, you got to be like full on, fully present when live comes on. And I was a little spacey today. So thank you. I'm going to post this online, and I'm going to post it on my YouTube, the full lecture, and on my Instagram. But I understand that, when you try to replay lives on Instagram, there are a lot of glitches, and then it will like restart the whole video. And it's very frustrating. So, do follow up on my YouTube if you want to check it out in full. All right. Thank you, guys. Hope everybody has a blessed weekend. Make most out of your time, and cultivate positive seeds in your life. Much love. Sorry, I'm ending on 2 platforms here. So